How do you bridge the sharp edges of traditional finance, or tri-fi, with the fast-moving frontier of blockchain? Well, in today's episode, I'm going to invite you to consider how the world of suits and ties can thrive together alongside hoodies and code. Because joining me today is the Chief Business Officer at Kadena, a proof-of-work blockchain that is pushing to merge the stability of Bitcoin security with the flexibility that developers expect from Ethereum. My guest's name is Annelise Osborne. She brings an insider's view on why she's stepped away from the familiar paths of mortgage-backed securities and regulatory task forces to help build a future where digital assets aren't just speculative investments. No, we're thinking bigger than that. We're thinking about trusted tools for capital markets. I also want to hear about her new book, Hoodies to Suits, which perfectly captures this transformation in a language that speaks to boardrooms and developer meetups alike. So today we're going to tackle what's blocking blockchain adoption, whether it be from regulation that lags behind innovation to the interoperability headaches that slow down that cross-chain progress. So, as we explore where decentralized tech meets old-school banking, ask yourself, what mindset shift would make blockchain more relevant to your daily work? And while you ponder that sentiment, I'm going to get today's guest on. So a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell everyone listening a little about who you are and what you do?
Neil, I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me. I am Annelise Osborne. I'm the Chief Business Officer of Kadena, which is a layer one proof of work blockchain, which I'm happy to dive into kind of what we're doing, which I'm super excited about. I also wrote a book that just came out in the last year called From Hoodies to Suits, Innovating Digital Assets for Traditional Finance, with the idea or the hopes of helping educate people about why blockchain is important for finance and why it's really just the next step in innovation.
And I'm really looking forward to finding out more information, not just about the company, but the role of blockchain in everything as well. But I suspect there's going to be an origin story behind all this. So for anybody listening who may not know your story yet, could you just share what first drew you from the world of traditional finance into the world of blockchain and digital assets? There's got to be a story there, right?
Sure. So, after business school, I worked in commercial mortgage-backed securities, which were really interesting at the time. It was 2003, so they'd been around, but they were really kind of in their infancy. And what I loved there was that it was innovative for finance and it decreased the cost of borrowing kind of for large players, and because it took the risk off the bank's balance sheets. And I did that for a long time, and it got to the point where it wasn't as interesting anymore because it was relatively standard. And it was just time for something new. And so I was asked to join a regulatory task force for ICOs. Now, I was doing a lot of board work at the time, and I wasn't familiar so much with ICOs, but I'd heard of them and wasn't sure what they are. These were very persistent lawyers who kept calling. And so I figured I needed to, I would sit down with them and figure out really what is blockchain and how does it work. And so I watched loads of YouTube. I read whatever I could. This is back in 2017, 2018. And the more I understand blockchain, the more I recognize the benefits it had for finance. And so I just look at it as kind of like high frequency trading, right? The next iteration of how it upgrades finance. And I looked around, and the people that were actually working to create digital asset securities, they were security tokens at the time, but the thought of how do we use this technology to use, in essence, debt or bonds or whatever it is, how it is today in the same format. But the people that were working in there were more kind of the hoodies idea. So entrepreneurs or tech people that didn't have the experience in finance and understand the structure and regulation. And that is where I found myself. I found a partner. We launched kind of digital asset securities together back in 2018. And so that's what it really was. It was kind of like it was understanding the benefits and then really just the challenge, stepping up for the challenge.
And one of the reasons I wanted to ask that question was from there, you wrote a book called From Hoodies to Suits, which brilliantly explored how to connect the innovative culture of Web3 with the more discipline of established capital markets. So what was it that inspired you to write that book? And what gap did you feel that needed closing?
Sure. So I started, as I said, in this space in 2018. I worked at, like, we had a broker dealer and launched digital asset securities, which was really early. I worked at ARCA Labs. ARCA has a tokenized treasury fund. ARCA is a crypto hedge fund. And all the time I've been working with how do we work with institutions or startups to create digital asset securities. And one of I think there's three holdbacks to adoption. I think the first is regulation, just clear cut regulation. I think the second is education. And then the third, I think, is interoperability, which has to do, you can look at it two ways. One, for the institution's back office systems plugging into a new technology. And then the other is actually within the ecosystem itself, the different chains talking to each other. So there's kind of more of a standard. And right after FTX had failed, I was talking to a bank who said they had a cease and desist doing anything blockchain or talking about blockchain until the following year. And I thought that FTX was a bad actor problem. I didn't think it's not a bad technology problem. And so going back to those three things, I figure, education was something I could do something about. And there were no books out there on how blockchain helped capital markets. And so I had never written a book. I never thought I would be an author, but I had a story I wanted to tell. And I wanted to have something that was not like a textbook, that was kind of an easy read, and entertaining, so that, Bob, the finance guy, would actually read through it and understand, oh, this makes a lot of sense. And so I decided I was going to do it, and made it happen. And, within 6 months of the idea, I had a book contract, and I left my job and started writing.
Wow, what an amazing story. And if we go back to the very beginning there in 2017, that's when crypto and blockchain went through that crazy spell, followed by crypto winter and lots of disruption and a little bit of confusion, and people were unhappy about where the space was heading. AI then kind of stole some of the headlines. This year, of course, Bitcoin has reached an all-time high. JP Morgan has done a complete U-turn and now investing in this space. And many in traditional finance, though, still remain incredibly wary of regulated digital assets, despite the clear innovation in this space. So what do you think are the biggest misconceptions that might be holding back the wider and more traditional institutional adoption?
So I think there's also two ways to look at it. One is kind of investing in crypto, right, as a digital asset, as an alternative asset investment, which I believe that with the ETFs for Bitcoin and Ethereum, I think there'll probably also be a mixed ETF as well at some point that is more of a just a basket, not just one or the other. That's really a way for institutions to get involved but not have a wallet. So they can go on to, their own Web2 systems or their own Fidelity accounts or what have you, and actually just invest. So I feel like that's one thing that people are getting more familiar with that. I think then there's the whole other use cases of blockchain and benefits. So the first, I think, being payments. So I think payments are really actually starting to pick up, and people are starting to realize, wow, if I'm accepting different currencies, I can use stablecoin. I can use stablecoin and save on any cross-border transaction fees, and I get the money today. Mm. So that's a lot, as opposed to having like a remittance that takes, days, weeks, or months, right? So I feel like there are kind of for adoption. I think one, it's recognized, and then one is recognizing kind of how we're looking at it, and then I think, actually, let me add on to, so the payments, but then also like, how do we use blockchain for tokenization of funds, or how do we get comfortable with blockchain for bonds, which I know are much more in Europe, they're a lot further along in the US because regulation is a little bit more detailed. And so I think people need to just, one, there needs to be regulation, and so that people know what they're doing. And then two, I really think it's people understanding they can either save money or make money in the space, because that is really what it all boils down to. And I think there's huge benefits from back office and payments here, that the winners will actually be much more competitive because they'll be more competitive in their back offices.
100% with you. And of course, you are the Chief Business Officer at Kadena. You're right at the forefront of blockchain infrastructure. But for people hearing about it for the first time, just tell me a little bit more about it, and also how you're helping to address some of the trust and maybe scalability challenges that we see in this space.
Sure. So Kadena was founded by two gentlemen that had launched JP Morgan's first innovation lab. And so they're coming from the TradFi space, but they are definitely tech developers. But they were used to working in institutions and institutional finance. And so one had previously worked at the SEC as well. And they left JP Morgan to create a public chain at the time. We've been live, or mainnet's been live for about 6 years. And so they wanted to create the security of proof of work in Bitcoin, which there aren't many proof of work chains anymore because now the Ethereum has gone to proof of stake. So I think the security that way, which is more cryptographic, right? And so I do think when some institutions look at the space, there's definitely more comfort there from a how do I get comfortable with using this technology. And then also the scalability, low gas cost and programmability of Ethereum. Our gas costs are very low. The idea of a web of chains, which we can actually continue to add on additional chains. So there's not one main chain. So that helps with the scalability aspect. We also have our smart contract language, which is Pact. And so Pact was really created for financial settlement, and it was created that was easier to read. It is our own smart contract language. We're not a huge chain yet. And so we need, finding more developers to actually build on Pact and get to know Pact. But then we're also becoming EVM compatible shortly. We're launching our testnet in the next few weeks. And that will be the next step to actually for that interoperability and the standards, just because EVM is such a standard. And then we'll have multiple chains that we can transfer back and forth. But we think that that's really kind of the next generation of where do we go? How do we grow and build? And we think that that's going to be an ease of use. Also, another thing for that we're working on is how do we make experiences more like Web 2 than Web 3? Web 3 has been very clunky. People don't want to, they don't understand it. But how, if we can create an app, or we have our Spire key, which is actually, you can sign on kind of with your biometrics into your wallet. And so things like that. We're doing a project. We're doing different types of grantee projects. One is with Croatia Football Federation, but it also is not. It's less finance, but more fan engagement. And how do companies communicate with their fans or their customer base, and then actually being able to offer them additional benefits and perks. But again, through an app. We have another non-financial digital product passport, boom tag, which in the UK, or not in the UK, in Europe, you have DPP, which is digital product passport, which is understanding the life cycle of products. And so where do they come from, where they originate from? And so we have that as well, which again is an app. Boom tag does sports things, and you can actually tag them and apparel. And so you can actually tag it, know where it's from, but also their clients really like it because it keeps everything in a wallet, so you kind of know what you have. So it's almost like collector, but it also checks the digital product passport box. So we have those as well as other kind of fun tokenizations that we're working on, different debt projects that we're working on. But there's a lot of different opportunities, and it's how do we, there's so many different blockchains out there. And I believe that everyone kind of has their added value. So I really believe DeFi and TradFi will merge. So we have kind of our DeFi business that we're also building out with lenders on chain and DEXs and different opportunities there. And then also building out the TradFi space. If you think about DeFi, it's very similar to private credit, for example. So we're ideally creating a platform under kind of the regulated authorities that will be able to merge the two. So that's a lot, but I'm happy to dive into any aspect there.
It's incredibly cool. Such a wide variety of different areas that you're working on. And I'm curious, so as someone that's worked on both sides of the fence, both legacy financial institutions and blockchain startups, are there any particular lessons that you've learned about building partnerships that truly merge these worlds rather than just paying lip service? You probably come across so many obstacles and challenges, but I'd love to hear more about the kind of lessons that you've learned along the way here.
One, find the right partners, right? Right vision. I would say for anyone, if you're looking at raising money, for example, and I've worked on both the investing side and looking for investment side. Those are your partners. You're in essence getting married to them. So make sure that you're on the same lines. I think tech is a tool. I think the relationships between people to get things done is super important. I would make sure that you're working with people that are actually creating things as opposed to, there's a lot of people around that want to make a quick buck. I think we witnesses that a lot, versus that are in it for the long haul and working to how do we upgrade finance is how I look at that. So I think that, being very clear in communication, this is what I'd like to do and this is why. I think sometimes one thing I found between kind of the hoodies and the suits, if we go to that analogy again, is that there's a different language spoken. And so how do the finance people think of it this way, or the suits think of it this way, and then the tech guys or the hoodies speak this thing, and you could be saying the same thing. It's just finding ways to translate that. So that's what I feel like is part of my job with whatever I'm doing, is merging those two languages to say, well, this is what this is looking for, and this is what they're trying to say and deliver. So that's something as well. But also just keep educating yourself. Right? I feel like I'm always learning. I think it's super important. There's companies that come up that I don't know what they do. So I ask a lot of questions and I just say, and then I try to repeat what someone has said to me to make sure I understand it. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, great, man. Great advice. And there's 4,000 miles between us. And I think that analogy of hoodies versus suits works in every corner of the world, which is something we all see in this space. And if we were to look beyond the technology for a moment, are there any other shifts you think need to happen in maybe regulation, mindset, or education and continuous learning to make digital assets just a natural part of mainstream capital markets? What needs to happen here, do you think?
So when we use our phone, which is a supercomputer that we have in our hands all the time, we don't think about the technology as much. We think about the usability. And so I think that from an education and a regulation perspective, both of those, the idea is looking at not trying to regulate the technology as regulating the applications of how we use it, right? So I think that is something that would be great for people to understand and give clear guidance on how to, I would say, regulate or create policies. I know in the United States, we're very much focused on creating policies and being much more innovation open now than we were historically. I recognize that obviously in Europe, there's, Micah has done a great job in coming up with guidelines. I know there's different pockets around geographically. This is absolutely global. Everything that we're creating is global. I think when we're dealing with securities, yes, we still need to protect investors. That's what the idea of regulation is for. And we just need to work together. Like the whole idea of hoodies and suits, it's not to bifurcate. It's just to say, the hoodies created a $3 trillion industry. That's amazing. And we can get that further working along with the suits. And so I think there's a lot of ways we can work together and not be concerned if we don't understand it to close a door.
So finally then, if you could offer one piece of advice to finance professionals listening or young technologists, hoodies or suits, if they're reading your book or just inspired by your conversation today, what mindset or skill do you think they should be focusing on to thrive in this intersection of the two worlds we're talking about?
Sure. I would just keep learning. I listen to podcasts like yours, for example. I do a lot of listening. I do a lot of watching as well. And I do reading. So it's kind of like you're never going to stay on top of everything, I will say. The more I know I don't know. But that's what I would say. Stay curious, but also recognize we're all coming from different backgrounds. And one of the most important things, I think, in innovation is having that diverse mindset of looking at it from a different way. Because if we all looked at it from the same way, nothing new would come, right? And so that's what I would say. I would say, keep learning. I love this space because there's always so much to learn. And then, figure out how you can partake and what you can add, because we can all add something.
Completely agree with you. Keep learning. What a great message to end on. But before I let you go, we are entering the holiday season. People are going to be picking up their summer reads. Is there a book that has inspired you or you just recommend to pick up and read and learn something from that we can add to our Amazon wish list? What would it be and why?
Sure. So I do read a lot, especially before I wrote the book. I had to read everything that was out there. Some are harder reads than others. I think what's really interesting in this space, and also from kind of the policymaker perspective, or even, even us, is there was a book I read called Tracers in the Dark, which is super interesting in the sense that it kind of showed the bad reputation of Bitcoin and Silk Road, but right? Because they used cryptocurrency for something that was nefarious, but you can track and trace everything. And so that was super interesting. So one would think that that was an eye opener for me about how they could, track and trace through even Tornado Cash. So that was interesting. Also super interesting. Came out a while ago, but there's a movie called The Great Hack. And that was about all the data that's out there. So that's really kind of mind inspiring for me as well, especially when we're dealing with blockchain, which will be access to, or the opportunities for more data and more clear data. But I think those are both two really interesting. And I do read a lot of biographies and, some more recent books, but those are like Tracers in the Dark was kind of the biggest eye opener. I was also reading about there's a book about the next generation. I forget the name of it, but it's also interesting to think how the next generation is going to work with finance, because I'm a huge believer and what we're creating right now is for the digital ideas of millennial and Gen Z. I think it might be called Generations.
Oh, okay, I will look that up. I'll add both of the books to the Amazon wish list, and also we'll add a link to the movie as well for people to check out. And for anyone wanting to find out more information about you, your book, Kadena, of course, anything we want to find out more about, where would you like to point them?
Sure. LinkedIn is the easiest to get in touch with me. So Annelise Osborne. The book has a website. It's available on Amazon internationally and other places, from hoodies to suits, innovating digital assets for traditional finance. Kadena is Kadena, Kadena.io. But please reach out. I love to talk to people. I love conversations. That's how I learn. So it has been super great talking to you, Neil. I really enjoy conversations, and I'm always happy to chat.
Awesome. Well, I'll add links to everything to the show notes so people can find you nice and easily and check out that book, which is just a perfect read for whether you're a practicing finance professional, technical developer, or fintech participant, and anyone else interested in this intersection of finance and technology that we talked about today. It is an incredibly exciting space, and it's a refreshing change to not talk about AI for a day. So thank you so much for being a breath of fresh air. Thank you.
Thanks, Neil. Appreciate it.
So what part of Annelise's story resonated with you today? Was it her leap from regulated finance to a blockchain startup? Or was it her vision for a world where hoodies and suits sit at the same table to build the next financial era? I'd love to hear your thoughts on that one. And I think, looking back, when I reflect, I think Annelise's advice to keep learning is a timely reminder that we're all students in this new landscape. Because yesterday's safe assumptions are tomorrow's roadblocks. And if you're wrestling with how to integrate blockchain into legacy systems, or wondering if your organisation can afford to ignore it any longer, I think this episode is a window into what's possible from traditional capital markets embracing Web3's potential, but doing so responsibly. Certainly left me questioning how teams might move past fear and hype to use blockchain where it genuinely creates value. And after hearing Annelise today, what steps will you be taking to bridge old finance with the new? And on that thought, email me, techblogwriter@outlook.com, X, LinkedIn, Instagram, TikTok, just at Neil C. Hughes. But that's it for today, so thank you for listening as always, and I'll be joining you much sooner than you think. By the time you hit that refresh button on your podcast feed, I'll be right back. Speak with you all then. Bye for now.